The slap wasn't loud, but it made a 76-year-old woman drop her cane, and it made the entire boarding gate go silent. No music, no announcements, no chatter. Just the sharp clatter of carved wood hitting polished tile, and the sound of one flight attendant's voice, full of judgment. "You don't belong in first class. Step aside." The woman didn't flinch. She just slowly bent down, picked up her cane, and looked the young flight attendant directly in the eyes. Her tone was calm, unnervingly calm. "You've just made the gravest mistake your board will not survive. Tell us where you're watching from, and what would you do if you saw this happen in real life?" 10 minutes earlier, the boarding gate had been like any other, chaotic. Families corralling kids, business travelers power walking like their flight depended on it, and intercom announcements crackling over barely working speakers. In the middle of it all, she waited quietly, not demanding attention, not looking for help. She was easy to overlook, intentionally so. A small, silver-haired woman in a smoke-gray coat, holding a simple boarding pass and a carved cane. Her scarf was emerald silk, the only pop of color on her. Her brooch was antique, gold and tasteful. She didn't carry designer bags or wear expensive shoes, and that, apparently, was enough. The flight attendant spotted her almost instantly. Her name tag read Darla Kerr, and she moved like she had something to prove. She spoke loudly, not just to the woman, but for everyone within earshot. "Ma'am, this line is for first class only. You need to move back." The woman said nothing. She simply held out her boarding pass. Darla didn't even glance at it at first. "I said, back of the line. First class is reserved for our premium guests." Still calm, the woman extended the pass again, gently. Darla snatched it from her hand. There was a beat of silence as she finally scanned it. Then a confused frown. The name was there. The seat was correct. Everything checked out. But Darla didn't apologize. She slapped the boarding pass back against the woman's chest, just hard enough to knock her cane loose. It fell with a loud crack onto the floor. People gasped. A couple near the window turned. Someone began recording, and Darla just said, "Clearly someone printed the wrong class. That's not my fault." That's when the woman spoke. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't even pick up her cane yet. She just looked Darla straight in the eyes and said, "You've just made the gravest mistake your board will not survive." No one understood what that meant. Not yet. 10 rows back in the crowd, a man in a suit frowned. He recognized that tone. The restraint. The power tucked inside every syllable. He couldn't place her name, but he knew that look. And just like that, the energy shifted. The woman bent slowly, picked up her cane, and walked out of the line. She took out a phone. It wasn't the latest model. It didn't have 3 cameras. But the moment she dialed, her face changed. Calm, surgical, like flipping a switch. 1 number, 1 call. "Gate E18, Skylux Airlines, passenger rights breach, flag initiated, black status authorized." Click. That was it. She tucked the phone away. Nothing happened, immediately, which made it worse. Darla scoffed, rolled her eyes, and waved the next guest forward. But passengers were watching now. No one looked relaxed anymore. And 10 feet away, someone in a dark blazer started typing furiously on their laptop. Back in the executive floor of Skylux's operations office, 3 terminals away, a notification pinged. "Urgent. Air Ethica flag. Black status." The assistant staring at the screen turned white. He turned to the man beside him and whispered, "She did it. Langston just triggered it." The man didn't even respond. He stood up immediately. 5 minutes later, a Skylux senior officer sprinted to the gate. He wasn't calm, he wasn't composed, and he wasn't here for Darla. He rushed straight to the woman still standing quietly by the wall. "Ms. Langston, please forgive the delay. Your seat is ready. We are honored to have you aboard." Now people were really staring. Darla blinked. "Wait, Ms. Langston?" The name meant nothing to her, but it meant everything to Caleb. the officer now glaring at her like she'd just set fire to the company's balance sheet. He turned. His voice was quiet, but the words hit like a verdict. "Step aside, Miss Kerr. You're done." Darla tried to protest. "I was just doing my job. She didn't look like—" "Like what?" Caleb asked. Silence. A woman nearby whispered to her husband, "Beatrice Langston. She's the one who wrote the International Passenger Dignity Protocol." A man Googling on his phone muttered, "She runs Air Ethica," and the room went still again. Beatrice didn't gloat. She didn't make a scene. She simply nodded, accepted the apology offered in a panic, and walked toward the gate. The man in the suit who had watched it all unfold murmured under his breath, "She's not just somebody. She's the woman who decides who's allowed to fly." Behind him, another passenger replied softly, "And today, someone forgot that." 3 years ago, the name Beatrice Langston didn't trend on social media. It didn't show up in investor reports. It certainly didn't pop up in airline crew training manuals. And yet, it should have. Because if it had, Darla Kerr might have looked twice before humiliating her. If she had, she would have known that Beatrice Langston was the reason her airline was even allowed to land in Frankfurt, Narita, JFK, or Heathrow. But most people never notice the people who move quietly. That's the point. Beatrice lived alone in a small stone townhouse nestled at the edge of Edinburgh, just past the old cathedral, but not quite near the castle. The house had ivy growing up the side, with windows that glowed a warm amber in the late afternoon. The locals knew her only as Ms. Langston, the lovely woman with the cane, who always left out a dish of water for neighborhood dogs and refused to take more than one bag when grocery shopping. No one knew that just upstairs, in a locked room with blackout shades, sat a private terminal connected directly to the Air Ethica gateway. And no one knew that she was the one person in the world with full override authority. Not a team, not a committee, just her. When she first proposed Air Ethica back in 2014, most industry leaders laughed. "Airlines don't need morality checklists," they told her. "We need fuel efficiency and better margins." But Beatrice had already seen too much. She had watched a blind man removed from a plane because a gate agent didn't feel comfortable. She had seen a soldier in uniform denied a seat upgrade he'd paid for, while the airline gave it to an influencer for free. And she had seen too many elderly passengers like herself treated like burdens, brushed aside, talked down to, ignored. So she built Air Ethica. She designed it with layers of accountability, real-time ethics scoring, independent flight crew evaluations, live passenger behavior analytics, and a weighted compliance index connected directly to 14 regulatory agencies and 6 ESG investment funds. And she gave herself one power no one else had, the black status flag. Once triggered, it couldn't be undone for 72 hours. It would immediately suspend all active boarding privileges at 21 major international airports, freeze ESG-aligned funding through linked financial networks, alert both FAA and EU Transport Council for compliance review, trigger a temporary ethics lock on the airline's ability to renew international permits. And that's exactly what she activated with one call at Gate E18. Beatrice never wanted to be a headline. She had no social media, no podcast, no company logo stamped on tote bag. She'd been offered board seats, honorary degrees, even a small fortune from a private airline that wanted her to quietly deactivate a score they didn't like. She declined all of it, because for her, power didn't come from visibility. It came from credibility, silence, precision. The kind of power people only notice after it's already leveled the building. The events of that morning at the airport hadn't surprised her. Not entirely. She'd been ignored at lounges before. She'd had gate agents wave her toward the wrong lines. But never had someone laid a hand on her. Never had someone slapped her boarding pass out of her hand like she was trash. And in that moment, surrounded by travelers too afraid to speak, crew members too indifferent to act, and one young woman whose arrogance was louder than the intercom, she knew exactly what needed to be done. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because someone had to remind this industry that dignity wasn't optional. When her call triggered the black flag, a notification quietly reached Air Ethica's Brussels operations hub. A team of 5 analysts, all seated around a long digital wall of dashboards, stood up almost at once. None of them asked questions. They knew what it meant. One analyst, a German woman named Clara, simply murmured, "Langston's live." She clicked 2 commands. Immediately, Skylux Airlines' score dropped from 88.3 to 58.1. A non-compliant tag appeared beside their name on the live gate clearance panel, visible to 21 airports. A soft alert pinged across investment platforms linked to Vanguard ESG, Nord Ethics Fund, and Aero Green Capital. Those funds began to review and freeze capital disbursement linked to Skylux, per ethical investment agreements. The total impact over the next hour would cross $960 million. Back on the ground at Charles de Gaulle, a quiet storm had started. A mid-level legal advisor for the airline had just sprinted out of a side office and was now arguing with a director on the phone, red-faced and sweating. Another crew member had been seen wiping her name badge clean and slipping quietly toward the staff elevator. And Darla Kerr? She was sitting in a side chair near gate E18, staring at the floor, trying to process what had just happened. She kept replaying it in her head. That sentence, that voice, that look in the woman's eyes. "You've just made the gravest mistake your board will not survive." It wasn't said with anger. It wasn't said with pride. It was said the way a judge reads a sentence, as a matter of fact. Beatrice now sat in her seat, 1A, as assigned. The cabin was silent. Passengers in first class sat awkwardly upright, as if unsure whether to speak to her, thank her, or simply avoid eye contact altogether. The new flight attendant approached her, young, nervous, polite. "Would you care for anything before takeoff, Ms. Langston?" Beatrice smiled kindly. "Just water, dear, and perhaps a moment of silence." The attendant nodded, disappearing without a word. 10 rows back, a business traveler with salt and pepper hair whispered to his seatmate, "That's the woman who shut down 3 airlines last year." His companion blinked. "Really?" She didn't say a word, just flagged them. The next morning, they were off the tarmac. No one doubted it. As the plane taxied, a notification buzzed quietly on Beatrice's phone. It was from the Air Ethica team. "Black flag received. 5 airports suspended. 960 Airlines freeze confirmed. FAA Ethics Council convening." Beatrice didn't reply. She simply locked the screen, placed the phone gently in her lap, and stared out the window. The runway rolled past. The plane lifted. And the world, slowly but surely, began to shift with her. The cabin door clicked shut with a quiet finality. The world beyond gate E18 was now sealed off. Outside, phones buzzed. Legal teams scrambled. 5 airports had already pulled Skylux from priority clearance. Investors were panicking in 3 different time zones. But inside this plane, silence. The kind of silence you could feel in your chest. Seat 1A, the very front of the first-class cabin, was occupied by a woman who had just flipped the fate of an airline with 1 phone call. Beatrice Langston didn't ask for anything. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain. She didn't demand an apology. She just sat there, calm and still, with her hands folded over her cane and her eyes fixed out the window as if the clouds themselves had answers. Across the aisle, a man in a navy blazer glanced at her, then quickly looked away. He didn't want to be caught staring, but he knew who she was now. Everyone did. They'd seen the whispers spread through the gate like a brush fire. Beatrice Langston, Air Ethica, the ethics flag. It didn't matter that she was in her 70s. Didn't matter that she wore no makeup and carried a $30 handbag. She had just cost someone $960 million and a seat at 5 airports, with a single call. And now she was quietly buckling her seatbelt. Meanwhile, at the rear of the plane, Darla Kerr stood frozen in the galley. She was no longer barking orders, no longer tossing glances of superiority. She was pale, lips pressed tight, holding a silver tray with a bottle of still water and a lemon wedge. Her supervisor had made it crystal clear. You will serve her with grace. You will address her as Ms. Langston. You will not speak unless spoken to. You're lucky you still have your badge. The humiliation was setting in now, slow and sharp. She had gone from gate queen to disgraced servant in under 30 minutes. And worst of all, the woman she'd tried to dismiss wasn't just a passenger. She was the one who could shut the entire airline down. Darla took a deep breath and walked down the aisle. The tray in her hands didn't feel heavy until she reached row 1. There, in 1A, Beatrice sat like she'd been born to that seat. Not with arrogance, but with stillness. Like the chair had been designed to fit her back exactly. Darla cleared her throat softly. Ms. Langston, may I offer you some water before takeoff? Beatrice didn't even turn. She spoke gently. You already did, but you may try again. The sentence landed like a dropped pin in a courtroom. Darla blinked, unsure how to respond. Beatrice finally looked up, her eyes calm but unreadable. Place it on the armrest, then step back. Darla obeyed. No one else in the cabin dared to breathe. Row 2 was occupied by a couple in their 60s, both well-dressed, both wide-eyed. The husband leaned toward his wife and whispered, Remember that scandal last year with Sky North, when they got pulled from Heathrow? She nodded. Same woman, different airline. Behind them, a younger passenger was already texting. I'm on a flight with the woman who just torpedoed Skylux. She's in 1A. It's her, the ethics gatekeeper. Back in her seat, Beatrice took a slow sip of water. She closed her eyes. It wasn't victory she felt. It was weariness. She hadn't wanted this today. Hadn't woken up planning to invoke the black flag. But some lines could not go unanswered. Some lessons had to be taught, not with shouting, not with lawsuits, but with precision silence. She opened her eyes again and scanned the cabin. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the girl in row 14 whose accent might someday be mocked. It was about the older man with the prosthetic leg who might be asked to move because he looks uncomfortable. It was about every person who had ever been told, you don't belong here, not because of their ticket, but because of what they looked like holding it. Darla returned to the galley, heart pounding. She didn't even make it halfway before her earpiece crackled. Ms. Kerr, your presence is requested at the front. She swallowed hard. Copy. Turning back, she made her way toward the front of the cabin again. But this time, it wasn't to serve. The first officer was waiting. So was the cabin manager. So was Beatrice. We'd like to confirm your statement regarding the earlier incident, the officer said, voice clipped. We've reviewed the footage. We'd like to hear it from you directly. Darla's throat tightened. I didn't know who she was. Beatrice tilted her head slightly. But you knew I wasn't welcome. That was enough for you. The officer nodded. Thank you, Ms. Langston. Ms. Kerr, please take a seat in the jump seat. You are relieved of service for this flight. Gasps flickered through the first-class cabin like sparks. Darla stood frozen, the full weight of shame blooming behind her eyes. She turned away without another word. Beatrice didn't watch her go. At cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. A different flight attendant approached Beatrice quietly, kneeling to her level. Would you like dinner served, Ms. Langston? Or shall we hold service for you? Beatrice shook her head kindly. Let the others eat. I've already had my fill of empty offerings today. The woman nodded and stood, smiling tightly. Hours passed. Passengers drifted into uneasy naps. Trays were cleared. Cabin pressure held. And somewhere over the Atlantic, Beatrice Langston leaned her seat back, pulled a blanket to her waist, and finally allowed herself a breath. Tomorrow would be loud. The headlines would spin. The airline would panic. Officials would issue statements. Apologies would come, some sincere, some strategic. But tonight belonged to the silence, to the woman in 1A, to the passengers who watched power not shouted, but wielded with a nod, a pause, a phone call. The plane was still gliding over the Atlantic, but down on the ground, the world was already on fire. By the time Flight 762 had crossed into U.S. airspace, Beatrice Langston's name had quietly, but irreversibly, broken containment. It began with a single tweet. From a venture capital analyst in row 2. Just witnessed a flight attendant slap a woman in 1A. Turns out she's the final ethics approver for Air Ethica. Oh, and she just triggered the black flag. Lord, this airline is done. It got 7 retweets in 1 minute, then 1 to 12, then 3,800. Then it hit a blue check account with 2.2 million followers. Within 45 minutes, the words Ms. Langston, Skylux suspension, and passenger dignity were trending globally. In a Manhattan boardroom, a dozen men and women in tailored suits stared at the projection screen in silence. On it, a real-time ethics dashboard. The Skylux rating had dropped to 58.1, flagged non-compliant. In bold red letters, international clearance, suspended, 5 major airports. Someone finally whispered, "She actually did it." The CEO, Gregory Wells, didn't respond. He was still trying to process how a 76-year-old woman with no PR team, no press statement, and no TikTok account had just wiped $960 million off their future earnings, mid-air. "We need to fix this," someone said. Gregory snapped. "We need to find her first, then we fix this." But Beatrice didn't want to be found. She wasn't scrolling Twitter. She wasn't reading think pieces about the ethics enforcer. She wasn't answering her phone. She was sipping chamomile tea and looking out the window of 1A like she was riding a train through the countryside, not mid-flight in the eye of a global ethics storm. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted. Nobody was talking above a whisper. The attendants were walking like librarians, extra careful, eyes wide open, moving around Beatrice like she was a priceless sculpture no one had the courage to dust. Even the co-pilot had come down at one point, not to say anything, just to look at her, nod once, and walk away like he'd just brushed past a Supreme Court justice. One passenger tried to strike up a conversation. "Excuse me, Ms. Langston, I just wanted to say..." Beatrice raised one hand gently, never turning from the window. "Some things are better left in silence, dear." He swallowed, nodded, sat back down. Meanwhile, Darla sat in the jump seat, her hands clasped tight in her lap. She could feel the eyes. Every crew member who walked by her, even the junior ones she used to bark orders at, avoided her gaze. Her ears were still ringing from what the cabin manager had told her. "You may be looking at a federal ethics violation. This goes well beyond internal discipline." Her career wasn't just in jeopardy. It might already be over, and she hadn't even landed yet. Meanwhile, in Brussels, inside Air Ethica's command hub, the analytics wall was glowing red. New lines lit up every 5 seconds. Munich, suspended Skylux clearance for next 48 hours. Toronto, canceled 2 Skylux flights pending review. Singapore, Changi, Ethics Committee convening early session. FAA HQ, passenger dignity protocol file, opened. And in the center of the room, Clara, the analyst who had flagged the black status earlier, turned to her director. "This might trigger the framework update." The director nodded. "Get the Langston protocol file ready. We may need to table it with FAA by end of day." On the flight deck, Captain Ron Beck tapped the intercom button, then paused. He wasn't sure what to say. After 22 years in the air, he'd seen storms, reroutes, even a mid-air proposal gone horribly wrong. But he'd never flown a flight where a single passenger had brought 5 airports to a halt without so much as raising her voice. He finally cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're expecting a smooth landing into JFK in approximately 1 hour. In the meantime, we ask all passengers to remain in their seats and show courtesy to all guests aboard." He didn't mention her name. He didn't have to. Back in seat 1A, Beatrice took a slow breath. She could feel the weight of the cabin around her. Not heavy, but aware, like the whole plane was holding its breath in her presence. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even particularly proud. She was tired, not of the incident, but of the system that made this moment necessary. She remembered being told at age 60 that she was too old to lead ethics in a tech-based world. She remembered a boardroom sneering when she proposed a morality-based clearance system. She remembered a young executive, barely 30, who once told her, Passengers should earn dignity, not expect it. And now, here they were, watching the whole machine buckle because she expected what should have always been offered freely. Across the cabin, someone muttered, "She's going to bankrupt them." Another replied, "Good. Maybe next time they'll think before throwing hands at someone's grandmother." In a back office at JFK, the terminal director's phone rang. "This is Langston's flight. We need to prep for immediate federal arrival. She's not to be stopped. She's not to be questioned. And make sure your people know. We are now under FAA ethics review." "Yes, sir. And if you see her, say thank you, quietly." As the plane descended, Beatrice opened her bag. She pulled out a slim notebook, real leather, worn edges, initials BL in gold leaf, and wrote something. Just one sentence. Then she closed it, slid it back into her bag, and straightened her coat. The runway came into view. The cabin braced. And in the silence that followed, a quiet revolution continued unfolding. All because one woman refused to raise her voice, but knew exactly where to place her silence. The wheels of Flight 762 touched down at JFK with barely a bounce. But what waited beyond the tarmac was anything but smooth. On the runway, 3 black SUVs idled quietly beside an unmarked terminal. Inside, agents in gray suits reviewed a manifest list. No press badges, no cameras, just silence, and a name written in red. Langston, Beatrice M. Not a single person dared to pronounce it out loud. Inside Terminal 8, gate agents shuffled nervously. The word had spread. The woman in seat 1A was the reason 5 international airports had pulled out of Skylux within 3 hours, and she hadn't even opened her mouth publicly. CEO Gregory Wells paced like a caged dog inside Skylux headquarters. "They're calling it the Langston incident." His assistant replied, "It's already on the front page of The Guardian. CNN just broke it. CNBC's running with it as the billion-dollar slap." Gregory slapped his own forehead. "Do we have a statement?" The PR director shrugged, sweating. "Every draft looks like an excuse. Legal said don't even mention her name. So what? We just let this spread?" Silence. Gregory leaned in, voice flat. "She's not just a passenger. She's the final clearance on our ethics pipeline. She built the framework. This isn't a PR problem. This is survival." He looked around. Who made contact with her on the flight? Flight leader Kerr. "She's being held at JFK for interview. FAA wants transcripts." "Fire her." "She's already suspended, sir." "Then fire the entire cabin crew." Beatrice didn't walk with a sense of victory. She never did. She stepped off the plane the same way she boarded it. Quiet, steady, no fanfare. Her cane tapped rhythmically as she moved through the private corridor toward the secure exit. There were no cameras. That was intentional. She had refused all press contact. No statements. No apologies to accept. No headlines to respond to. But that didn't stop the world from spinning. By now, Twitter had dissected every moment of the flight. She didn't even raise her voice. That's the most terrifying kind of power. Imagine being the girl who slapped the woman who certifies your industry's entire ethics system. Seat 1A just rewrote aviation history. The hashtag #HasHadLangstonSilence was now trending in 9 countries. At the FAA's East Coast Command Center, Deputy Director Lisa Monroe stared at her screen. On it, a freeze frame of the in-flight security footage. Beatrice sitting calmly. Darla leaning in with her hand raised. The slap frozen midair. The audio file played. No screaming, no cursing, just one line from Beatrice. "I see." Lisa turned to her staff. "Flag the entire flight. Full audit. Ethics breach. Security lapse. Protocol failure. Pull every badge connected to Flight 762. Immediate suspension pending investigation." Even the pilots. Especially the pilots. At JFK, in a private lounge, Beatrice sat with a warm cloth over her hands, sipping ginger tea. An airport representative approached gently. "Ms. Langston, we've arranged for a private vehicle to take you to your residence or wherever you prefer. Is there anything you need?" Beatrice smiled faintly. "I'll be going home. No need for ceremony. The woman hesitated. Ms. Langston, if I may, I just wanted to say thank you. Beatrice looked at her. For what? For reminding them that silence is not weakness. Beatrice didn't reply. That evening, in global headlines, Skylux under federal ethics investigation. Airline crew suspended after passenger triggers 960 Melmau's ethics freeze. Langston protocol activated. FAA to hold emergency hearings. Journalists demanded comment. Skylux issued a generic one. We regret the incident and are cooperating with regulators. We are committed to passenger dignity and will review internal procedures immediately. It did nothing. Investors pulled out. 3 travel platforms paused ticket sales. Skylux stock fell 18% by closing bell. In the cabin crew's group chat, messages flew like bullets. They pulled my credentials. HR just called. I'm under formal review. She really flagged the whole airline. I didn't even talk to her, but now I'm suspended. Anyone know where Darla is? No one did. In a quiet townhome on the Upper West Side, Beatrice placed her cane gently by the door. She sat by the window, overlooking the city she had served quietly for 4 decades. On her table was the same notebook from the flight. She opened it again. This time, she wrote 2 new lines. Power doesn't always need a microphone. Sometimes, a nod is louder than a scream. She closed the book. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Lights blinked across the skyline. But in her room, all was still. And from that stillness, the entire aviation industry began to tremble. 3 days after Flight 762 landed, the Senate hearing room was at full capacity. Reporters, aviation executives, FAA directors, and policy advisors all sat in stiff suits, flipping through printed copies of documents they now pretended to understand. Every microphone bore the seal of the United States government. Every camera was live. But no one was looking at the chair in the center, because the woman who had triggered this hearing wasn't there. Beatrice Langston had declined to attend. No explanation, no written statement, no public comments, just silence. And yet, somehow, she was the loudest person in the room. The session began with FAA Administrator Carlos Denton taking the microphone. He looked tired. 3 days ago, he began, a violation of passenger dignity on board Flight 762 triggered what we now recognize as a full-scale systemic ethics failure within the aviation industry. He glanced at his binder, then back at the room. The passenger in question, Ms. Beatrice Langston, is not only a certified ethics evaluator under the Air Ethica Gateway, but also the original architect of the Passenger Dignity Protocol, submitted to this very chamber 11 years ago. A senator leaned forward. Was that protocol ever implemented? No, ma'am, Carlos said without hesitation. It was tabled, considered too idealistic. The room shifted uncomfortably. Next came the CEO of Skylux, Gregory Wells. He didn't look like the man who had barked orders in the boardroom 3 days prior. His tie was too tight. His voice had a tremor. We deeply regret the incident that occurred, he said into the microphone. And we take full responsibility for our failure to uphold the dignity and safety of all passengers. A senator interrupted. Mr. Wells, your airline was flagged as non-compliant across 5 international airports. Over $960 million in ESG funding was frozen in less than 48 hours. Were you aware Ms. Langston was on that flight? No, Gregory admitted. Had you or your staff done a proper manifest review, would you have acted differently? Gregory hesitated. Yes, the senator paused. That's the problem. Outside the building, protesters gathered with signs that read, Passenger dignity isn't optional. We fly with her. Silence isn't compliance. And floating among them, a massive screen showed one image on repeat. Beatrice Langston staring out the plane window. Calm, unbothered, holding a single cup of tea. It had become the symbol of the moment. Not outrage, not revenge, just clarity. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere changed when an older woman took the microphone. Her name was Margaret Keene. senior policy counsel and longtime friend of Beatrice Langston. She pulled out a printed document, thick and worn at the edges. "I'm holding the original draft of the Passenger Dignity Protocol, submitted in 2014 by Ms. Langston when she served as Director of Ethics Integration for the U.S. International Travel Council." She looked around the room, then read aloud. "Passengers shall not be required to perform dignity labor to prove their worthiness of humane treatment during air travel. That dignity is pre-approved by their humanity alone." There was a silence that fell like a velvet curtain. Then she continued, "Airlines failing to meet dignity standards shall be flagged and denied access to federally supported routes, ESG-backed investment, and international alliance privileges." Gregory Wells rubbed his face. Another senator whispered, "She saw this coming a decade ago." Margaret continued, "I propose we move forward with adopting the Langston Protocol, retroactively and permanently, as a condition of federal licensing." Someone from the Department of Commerce added, "Air Ethica Gateway already has the infrastructure to monitor this. It's used by 21 international airports and 6 ESG networks." Carlos Denton nodded. "We activate it, nationwide." That afternoon, the press broke the story. FAA unanimously adopts Langston Protocol, dignity standards to become federal condition for airline operation. Skylux faces criminal probe into ethics misconduct. Beatrice Langston declines public statement, issues no comment. And on cable news, every analyst had the same question. How did one woman with no PR team and no agenda force an entire industry to change? A guest on one panel replied simply, "She didn't shout, she didn't sue, she didn't tweet, she just said, 'I see.' And the world realized it was being watched." By evening, 3 more airlines had voluntarily suspended flights for internal review. 8 others requested access to the Air Ethica Gateway system. 2 ESG funds issued new investment guidelines. No airline receives capital without meeting Langston-level compliance. And Beatrice? She was home, feeding birds outside her kitchen window. No press on the lawn. No calls returned. Just her, the silence, and the quiet understanding that everything had changed. Not because she demanded it, but because she had already prepared for it. In her living room sat a single letter from a senator. "You said the future would come quietly, Beatrice. Well, it knocked." She folded it, smiled softly, and whispered to herself, "And this time, they opened the door." The ballroom inside the Geneva World Trade Center had never been this quiet. 43 airline CEOs, 17 heads of airport regulatory bodies, 8 global ESG fund managers, and not one dared to mention her name too loudly. The table at the center bore a plaque, written in 3 languages: International Aviation Ethics Compact, Emergency Summit. But everyone in the room knew what it really was. A peace treaty, quietly written by a woman who hadn't even shown up. Just before the opening remarks, one of the ESG fund directors whispered to the CEO of Transjet, "She's not coming, is she?" "No," the CEO replied. "She declined." "Smart," the director nodded. "Makes them come to her." They both looked at the empty chair at the front of the room, a simple white armchair with a brass nameplate that read, "In honor of Beatrice Langston." The summit moderator cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here. The Air Ethica Gateway has now been ratified by FAA, European Union Aviation Authority, and the Asia-Pacific Compliance Network." A screen behind him lit up with a single statement. "As of this date, no airline shall operate across international boundaries without full Air Ethica compliance certification." The room stiffened. No loopholes, no appeals, no pending reviews. Only one name could approve that compliance, and she wasn't in the room. CEO Gregory Wells of Skylux was the first to step up. He was no longer wearing the confident grin from earlier months, just a plain dark suit, a slightly shaky hand, and a quiet resignation. A camera zoomed in on his signature as he bent to sign the new compact. "We acknowledge the Passenger Dignity Protocol and agree to mandatory annual reviews by the Air Ethica Gateway." When he stepped back, another CEO followed, and then another, and another. No applause, just silence and pens scratching paper. One by one, each executive signed away a piece of unchecked power. And, for the first time, accountability entered the sky. Outside the venue, journalists waited behind barricades. One of them, a senior reporter from BBC, did a live feed. What we're witnessing here today is not just policy reform, it's cultural surrender, not to a politician, not to a lawsuit, but to an idea, one shaped by a woman who never had to raise her voice. Beatrice Langston's absence today speaks louder than any speech. Her silence has become a compass the aviation world can no longer afford to ignore. The anchor back in London asked, "Do we know where she is?" The reporter smiled. "She was seen feeding ducks in Central Park yesterday." Back inside, the summit moderator raised the final binder. "This document will now be known as the Langston Accord. Effective immediately, it will be logged with the United Nations Council on Transportation Ethics." He paused. "And with that, I ask all present to stand for a moment of acknowledgement for the architect of this system, whose grace under injustice has forever reshaped how we fly." Everyone stood. The cameras turned toward the empty chair at the front. The nameplate glinted under the spotlight. Back in New York, Beatrice Langston stirred her tea with a silver spoon. The television was on, volume low. She saw the room, the signatures, the camera panning to her name, but she didn't stop stirring. Her neighbor, Ellen, a retired school teacher, sat across from her. "You're not even going to say something?" Beatrice smiled faintly. "What would I say that hasn't already been said?" Ellen leaned in. "You crushed an entire system with 3 words and a look." Beatrice looked out the window. "They crushed themselves. I just held up the mirror." Later that night, a letter arrived in a blue envelope. It bore the UN emblem. She opened it, read it once. It was an invitation to speak at the Global Ethics Summit in Geneva. Prime slot, headline keynote. She folded it back in the envelope, didn't reply. By morning, the New York Times ran the headline, "The Chair That Changed the Industry." No speeches, no campaigns, just an empty seat and a silent force behind it. And in the editorial column, someone wrote, "Beatrice Langston didn't demand power. She designed it, then watched as others caught up." Elsewhere around the world, small changes began to bloom. At LAX, a new crew orientation module was added, Passenger Dignity 101. At Heathrow, a new plaque was placed in Terminal 5. "Here begins the Langston Standard." In Tokyo, a hologram display in an aviation museum told the story of the silent passenger who changed the sky. And in a dozen corporate offices, policy teams scrambled to rewrite handbooks that now had to meet a protocol designed 11 years ago and ignored until now. But back in her quiet brownstone on the Upper West Side, Beatrice Langston sat at her kitchen table. Notebook open, pen in hand. She wrote a single line. "Systems don't fall from force. They fall from rot. My job was only to point at it." She closed the book. The birds chirped outside her window, and above the city, planes began to fly. Not freer, not faster, but fairer. All because one woman refused to be rushed, refused to shout, and refused to forget what dignity looked like. The first airline to test the limits of the New World Order was Jet Vantage Global. Publicly, their CEO had praised the Langston Accord. Privately, they were betting on a loophole. Their internal memo read, "Compliance is optics. Make the documents look clean. Ethics training can be waived for legacy crew. Our ESG funders won't know the difference, they just need a seal." And so, they submitted their ethics audit to Air Ethica Gateway. Flawless. On paper. But the system wasn't just paper anymore. Air Ethica flagged the report in 22 seconds. The AI cross-checked passenger feedback logs from the last 90 days. It found 61 unresolved complaints, 29 reports of racial profiling, 12 citations of disability neglect, 3 video submissions from whistleblower flight attendants, hidden until now, all from the same 3 routes. One line in the system summary read, Ethics claim falsification detected. Review denied. No appeals, no lobbying, just a red flag, sent to all airport partners. Within 48 hours, Heathrow, Frankfurt, and Incheon suspended JetVantage's terminal access. ESG Group 1 froze $230 million in funding. Travel rating platforms delisted the airline's VIP status. It didn't feel like regulation. It felt like justice. CNN ran the headline, "Langston Protocol Bites. JetVantage denied international gate clearance for faked ethics report." And in smaller print, "Passenger feedback, not PR, now dictates airline access." One airline blogger posted, "It's not a rule anymore, it's a reputation system. Beatrice didn't build a framework, she built a mirror." At Skylux headquarters, CEO Gregory Wells watched it all unfold from behind a glass office door. He turned to his newly appointed Chief Dignity Officer, a former civil rights attorney named Dina Parks. "Would we have passed?" he asked. Dina smiled without warmth. "No, not 6 months ago," he nodded. "And now?" "Now," she said. "Your cabin crew has undergone 72 hours of trauma-informed service training. Every complaint gets a 48-hour resolution guarantee. Your flight feedback system is now anonymous and AI tracked. And most importantly," she paused, "your staff knows who Beatrice Langston is." Gregory exhaled slowly. "Then maybe we'll make it." Elsewhere, other airlines scrambled to adjust. North Aero created a new internal program called Humane in the Skies. Skynova launched a dignity response team, led by a retired judge. Azure Wings issued a public apology for years of arrogance and made cabin crew bonuses tied to dignity ratings, not ticket sales. But the most unexpected shift came from a private Gulf airline that had never admitted to any failure before. They rewrote their entire international crew manual and printed a quote on the front cover. "Dignity is not a feature. It is a condition of flight. B. Langston." Meanwhile, Beatrice Langston remained completely offline. No interviews, no memoirs, no new public sightings. Yet somehow, she was present in every room where change was happening. In airline boardrooms, in airport compliance teams, even in ESG investment review panels, where firms now asked, "Are you Langston compliant?" In one investor roundtable in Zurich, a fund manager put it bluntly, "Don't tell me your revenue growth. Tell me your ethics record. If Beatrice wouldn't get on your plane, neither will our money." That became a new shorthand in the industry. Would Beatrice fly this? By the end of the month, 12 global airlines had created a new executive role, Chief Dignity Officer. Their job wasn't to boost PR. It was to ensure every policy passed one silent test. Would this humiliate someone without power? If yes, it failed. If maybe, it got rewritten. And if no one could answer, they asked the chair. Because now, every boardroom had one empty chair, some literal, some symbolic. But on each, a brass plate read, "In honor of Beatrice Langston, the woman who never asked to be heard." And that was the quiet revolution. It didn't come through a lawsuit. It didn't come through a boycott. It didn't even come through words. It came because one woman sat still while the world lost its balance and let the system collapse under its own weight. Late one evening, on a small regional flight out of Boston, a young flight attendant gently offered her seat to an elderly woman who looked nervous. "No one should feel small up here," she whispered. The passenger nodded, tears in her eyes. The woman's name was Dr. Anita Bloom, co-author of the original Langston report in 2014. She pulled out a pen. "May I ask, what made you think to say that?" The flight attendant shrugged. "It's just something we say now in training. No one should feel small in the sky." Anita smiled. She would have liked that. In Beatrice's home, a letter arrived from an unknown address. Inside, a photo of 12 executives standing in front of a plaque, all smiling. Below it, engraved words, "This gate shall open to all, regardless of name, status, color, or voice. Certified by Dignity, as she taught us." Beatrice placed it on her mantel, beside a quiet framed picture of clouds taken from seat 1A. She whispered softly, more to herself than to the world. Good. They finally learned how to fly. The new CEO of Altia Jet Regional had only been in office 6 days when he made his first bold announcement. The Langston Protocol is a PR stunt. We're done pretending dignity is policy. His name was Reed Trenton, a former investment banker with zero background in aviation and a sharp tongue that turned boardrooms into battlegrounds. He stood at the front of the crew town hall meeting, sleeves rolled up, mic in hand, smiling like he'd just announced a holiday bonus. But no one clapped. At the back of the room, veteran flight attendant Maya Ortega stared at him. 26 years in the skies. She'd held the hands of dying passengers, sung lullabies to nervous children, been screamed at, spit on, and still offered tea with a smile. And now this man, who had never lifted a rolling suitcase in his life, was calling dignity a stunt. She looked around. The pilots were still. The younger crew members were whispering, but their eyes all met hers. And that's when she stood up. Without a word, Maya reached into her jacket, unpinned her gold crew badge, and placed it gently on the floor in front of her chair. The sound of metal on tile echoed through the room. Then another followed, and another. In less than 20 seconds, over 24 flight attendants, first officers, senior pilots, and gate agents had removed their badges and placed them in a line at Reed Trenton's feet. No shouting, no slogans, just silence, the kind that shakes the bones. Then Maya turned and walked out. They all did. Outside, the press was waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Cameras rolled. Reporters scrambled. But Maya didn't run. She stood behind a makeshift podium, a folding table from the break room, and unfolded a slip of paper. She spoke clearly, her voice steady. We are not resigning. We are not protesting. We are reminding the world why we wear these uniforms. She held up her badge. We serve passengers, not power, not pride, and certainly not the insult of calling dignity a weakness. The crowd behind her nodded silently. We are not employees today. We are human beings standing for other human beings. And she ended with a single line. If the skies forget how to care, we won't be there to fly them. Within hours, the footage went viral. Crew, with her, began trending globally. Union of Ethical Crew Members, though not an official union yet, became a symbol. News anchors called it the Langston Aftershock. Aviation Weekly ran the headline, "They didn't strike, they stood." And tucked at the bottom of the New York Times editorial page, a small announcement appeared. Beatrice Langston has mailed 31 handwritten letters this week. Each letter had only 5 lines. You weren't loud, you weren't angry, you were just right. That's what scares them most. I thank you, and so will the sky. No signature, just the return address from her quiet brownstone. Meanwhile, Reed Trenton faced a media storm. He tried to reframe it. We're modernizing, not backing down. But investors pulled out. Airport partners paused contracts. One senior captain refused to fly the morning route to Chicago unless the dignity policies were reinstated. Reed fired him, and 3 more crew quit in solidarity. The ripple reached Congress. A senator called it the quietest labor uprising in modern aviation. ESG advisors revised their investment criteria to include crew retention under dignity conflict. One anchor said flatly, "Forget lawsuits, forget strikes. This is a values mutiny." Back at Altia Jet HQ, Reed held an emergency meeting. Only 5 execs showed up. He slammed the table. "Where the hell is everyone?" No one answered. Because the crew wasn't just walking out, they were walking towards something. In a small rented office near the airport, Maya Ortega and a group of 11 others held their first unofficial meeting. No nameplate, no official status, just a whiteboard that read, "What does an airline with a soul look like?" They didn't know it yet, But that meeting would become the foundation of something much bigger. A cross-airline, multinational alliance of ethical crew members who would soon advise boards, write policy, and shape the next generation of aviation culture. It started with silence and a few metal badges on a tile floor. Back in New York, Beatrice Langston received a photo. It showed a row of crew members, arms linked, standing outside Altia Jet HQ. Someone had added a caption in simple white font: "We don't fly for them. We fly for all." She taped it beside her kitchen window, brewed her tea, and wrote a final note to Maya Ortega. The last line would become an emblem, printed on badges, manuals, and even cabin crew wristbands around the world. Compassion is not a disruption. It's the pre-flight check. The invitation came by email, but the subject line said everything. "We built this from your silence. Will you help guide it now?" Maya Ortega blinked as she read the message for the 5th time. The newly formed International Alliance of Passenger Dignity, a coalition of airlines, airport regulators, and crew unions, had offered her the role of Chief Dignity Officer. It wasn't a symbolic title. They wanted her to oversee real power, training compliance across 42 carriers, ethical standards for 77 airports, enforcement of the Langston Flight Ethics System, now officially named and recognized by the FAA, ASA, and ICAO. She whispered to herself, "This is bigger than anything I ever imagined." But even in that moment of triumph, she reached for something quiet first. Her handwritten letter from Beatrice Langston, now kept safe in a glass frame. Across the ocean, the final approval ceremony for the Langston Flight Ethics System was being prepared. It would be held in Geneva, same hall as the previous summit. But this time, the name wasn't hidden. Engraved on the front stage wall in gold letters, Langston Flight Ethics System. Compassion is not a disruption. It's the pre-flight check. Journalists speculated about whether Beatrice would appear. Rumors flew. She'd flown to Europe under a pseudonym. She refused to accept the honor. She was in poor health. But the truth was simpler. Beatrice Langston didn't need to attend the unveiling of her influence. She'd already lived it. Still, 1 week later, on a cool spring morning, a black town car pulled up outside the Alliance headquarters in D.C. A tall young man opened the door. "Miss Langston." Beatrice stepped out slowly. No cameras, no announcement. Just her soft leather shoes tapping gently on the marble floor as she entered the lobby. The receptionist froze when she looked up, then stood. Word traveled like wildfire. Within minutes, everyone in the building was on their feet. When Beatrice passed, people lowered their heads, not in forced deference, but out of deep, wordless reverence. One man near the elevator whispered to another, "That's the woman who made the sky safer with one letter," and a line of silence. Beatrice reached the top floor, a sunlit office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Capitol. There, carved into the main wall, was the line she had once written to Maya. "Compassion is not a disruption, it's the pre-flight check." She stood quietly in front of it. Maya arrived moments later. She didn't hug her. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I've been waiting to show you this." Beatrice smiled faintly. "You've already shown it to the world." Later that evening, Beatrice returned to the airport, but not as a policymaker, not as a figure of power, as a passenger. She booked her own flight, first class, one way. From D.C. to San Francisco, just a woman who had earned her quiet. At the gate, a young flight attendant scanned her boarding pass. He looked up, eyes wide, then quickly looked down again. "Thank you for flying with us, Ms. Langston," he said, voice slightly trembling. Beatrice nodded gently, but said nothing. She boarded without fanfare. Once seated in 1A, she looked out the window. The cabin was calm, clean, the kind of order built on care, not control. Just before takeoff, the same attendant came down the aisle with a silver tray. He placed a cup of Earl Grey before her, the way she liked it. Then, without a word, he straightened, placed his right hand over his heart, and bowed slightly. Beatrice met his eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, and neither did she. Somewhere high above Colorado, the cabin lights dimmed. Beatrice sipped her tea, closed her eyes, and smiled, not because she had changed the world, but because she had reminded it what it had forgotten. That power doesn't have to roar. That silence, when laced with truth, carries farther than any engine. That dignity, real dignity, begins before you even take flight. And that's how the skies changed. Not with noise, not with lawsuits, not with outrage, but with a look, a letter, and a seat in 1A, occupied by the quiet architect of the most human reform aviation has ever known. 12 years earlier, at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, a woman in a soft gray coat stood quietly at the first-class check-in counter. Her name was Beatrice Langston. She wasn't carrying a designer handbag. She wasn't wearing jewelry. And to the young airline staffer behind the desk, that meant only one thing. She didn't belong there. "Madame," he said, frowning at her passport. "This is the first-class line." Beatrice nodded calmly. "Yes, I'm aware." He looked at her boarding pass, then narrowed his eyes. "I'm sorry. This must be a mistake. Did someone else purchase this ticket for you?" "No, I booked it myself." "And how did you book it?" he asked sharply. Beatrice took a long breath. "With my account." "And what is your profession, madame?" Beatrice looked him in the eye. "Ethics oversight." The man snorted, half laughing. "Ethics? Interesting." Then, with a dramatic flair, he reached over the counter, snatched the printed boarding pass, and ripped it in half. The sound echoed like thunder. Other travelers gasped. Beatrice didn't move. The man leaned forward, voice dripping with condescension. "We reserve this line for premium travelers. Please, step aside." She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't ask for a supervisor. She simply stepped back, turned, and walked away, her coat fluttering behind her like a closing curtain. But somewhere deep in her mind, something shifted. That night in her Paris hotel room, she opened her laptop. She created a new blank document. At the top, she typed just 5 words. "Passenger dignity is not optional." That was the seed. The first invisible brick in the wall that would become the Air Ethica gateway. 48 hours later, the check-in desk at Charles de Gaulle's Terminal 2A quietly shut down for internal audit. The man who had ripped her ticket was suspended without public notice. No press, no announcement. But within the airline's internal systems, a silent flag was added to their ethics database. Initial incident, PDI Level 4, dignity violation. Subject, Langston B. It was the first entry in what would later evolve into the Passenger Rights Index. And no one knew, not even the CEO at the time, that they had just humiliated the future architect of the most powerful ethics infrastructure in global aviation. Beatrice didn't tell anyone. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't post on social media. She just wrote. For weeks, then months. And eventually, she built. Back in the present day, Beatrice sat at her old writing desk by the window. She pulled open a small drawer and removed a faded folder marked PDI 001. Inside was the original crumpled boarding pass, still torn, still stained faintly from that rainy Paris morning. She ran her fingers along the edge and smiled, not out of bitterness, but because this was where it all began. She reached for a small ivory card from a stationery set. With a black fountain pen, she wrote, "Don't fix the system for me. Fix it for the girl who's next." She folded the card, placed it in an envelope, and walked slowly to the corner mailbox at the end of her street. As she dropped it in, a young girl on a bike passed by. They made eye contact. The girl smiled shyly. Beatrice nodded, tipping her head. And in that small exchange, the entire meaning of the system became clear. It wasn't built to protect people like her. Already strong, already quiet, already patient. It was built for the young girl who wouldn't have to walk away next time. That evening, in a think tank in Washington, a staffer drafting new FAA regulations held up a note someone had taped to the wall. "Where did this come from?" he asked. No one knew, but the words stayed up. And by the end of the day, it was printed in the margin of every new ethics draft policy. "Don't fix the system for me. Fix it for the girl who's next." Anonymous. But everyone knew. Beatrice Langston didn't leave a note. She didn't write a final memo. She simply booked a one-way flight. No fanfare, just a quiet reservation. Row 1A, San Francisco to Kyoto. Her last international flight. She knew her body was slowing. She'd had the tests. The doctors had softened their voices. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted sky. The morning of departure, she dressed as she always did. Tailored slacks, soft cashmere wrap, small brooch tucked near her collar, the one shaped like a silver feather. Not a symbol, just a reminder that the smallest things could lift the heaviest weight, if made with care. At the check-in counter, the agent didn't recognize her. Beatrice didn't mind. She placed her ID down gently. The agent scanned it, paused, then looked again. The screen blinked. Langston, Beatrice. Air Ethica Gateway. Founder Authority. Verified. The young woman blinked. "Is this you?" Beatrice gave a small smile. The agent stood immediately. I'm sorry, Ms. Langston. I didn't know. No need." Beatrice interrupted gently. "That's the point, isn't it?" The girl nodded slowly, and for the first time in her short career, she personally walked a passenger to the gate. On board, Beatrice settled into her seat. The cabin was newer, clean, minimal, designed under the new Langston protocol. She could see the changes she'd helped spark. Wide aisles for disabled passengers, multi-language cabin signs, flight crew speaking with warmth, not script. No one made a fuss, no one asked for selfies, most didn't even know who she was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Halfway through boarding, the cockpit door opened. A tall woman in uniform stepped out, glanced down the aisle, then froze. She took a long breath and walked slowly to row 1A. "Ms. Langston?" she asked, voice low. Beatrice looked up. The woman removed her cap. "I don't expect you to remember me," she said, "but 12 years ago in Paris, I was the girl on the bike." Beatrice's eyes softened. The woman smiled. "I became a pilot because of you." Beatrice said nothing. She just reached for her hand, held it. That was enough. The pilot returned to the cockpit. The crew never announced Beatrice's presence, but somehow, word spread. Not with noise, with silence. The kind of silence that changes how people move. You could feel it in the way passengers helped each other lift bags, the way the cabin crew paused a beat longer when offering tea, the way the older man across the aisle looked at her, not in recognition, but in respect. It wasn't about fame. It was about something deeper than recognition. It was about what she had made possible for everyone in that sky. 30 minutes into the flight, a small envelope appeared beside her tray. It wasn't signed. Inside was a single sentence. "Your silence taught us how to speak." She didn't cry. She just folded the note, tucked it into her coat pocket, and looked out the window. Clouds rolled beneath them like soft white waves. The sun caught the edge of the wing, and for a moment, it looked like a silver feather. She chuckled quietly to herself. "Perfect," she whispered. As the plane began its descent into Kyoto, the young flight attendant approached one final time. "I know we're not supposed to ask, but could I?" Beatrice nodded. The attendant took out a small booklet, the new Passenger Dignity Handbook, used worldwide. "Would you sign the page that has your line?" Beatrice turned to the back page. There it was. "Compassion is not a disruption. It's the pre-flight check." She signed underneath with a soft hand. Just her first name, Beatrice. When the plane landed, no announcement was made, no standing ovation. But every crew member stood at the front cabin door, not in protocol, but in quiet reverence. Each nodded. Each whispered a thank you. She stepped off the jet bridge into the Kyoto evening light, and for the first time in her life, she walked into a world that no longer questioned if she belonged, because it had finally learned, from her silence, that everyone does. Weeks later, aviation forums whispered of the final flight. A few photos surfaced, none staged, none official. Just small moments, a hand on a shoulder, a folded note, a look exchanged between generations of women in the sky. And one image remained, row 1A, empty now, but not forgotten. The alliance later confirmed she had passed peacefully in Kyoto, surrounded by tea, books, and morning sun. No public memorial was held. But across 19 countries, every airline under the Langston Protocol quietly instructed their flight crews, on this day, every boarding will begin with 5 seconds of silence. No one explained why, but passengers noticed. Some asked, some just bowed their heads. And at 7:00 a.m., in a small regional airport in northern France, a young girl in uniform walked her very first passenger down the jet bridge. She paused, looked up, and whispered, "Don't fix it for me. Fix it for the girl who's next." If you made it to the end, tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever seen someone quietly change the world, like Beatrice? Share your thoughts below. And if someone ever made you feel like you didn't belong, what did you do? We're listening.